The following is a production of KYNE TV in cooperation with UNO Television. Consider This with Carol Schrader, a news and informational program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Here is your host, Carol Schrader.
I thought I would start this show that is taped today in the Milo Bale Student Center at the University of Nebraska by telling you that we are not going to talk about sex scandals here or in Washington. That should at least make you watch for 5 or 10 seconds to find out what we are talking about. This is Catholic Schools Week, celebrated across the country this week, and we have more than 45,000 students in eastern Nebraska in the Catholic schools, and today we're going to talk a little broader than that about the resurgence of private religious schools. But we kick this off by introducing the Assistant Superintendent of the Catholic Schools of Omaha, Sister Margaret Mary Murphy. Also with us today is the Administrator of Trinity Christian School in Omaha, Jean Bentley, a success story in Omaha that is incredible. Also with us today is Marcia Caterwright. She's co-founder of Trinity Lutheran School in Council Bluffs, which is sort of the other extreme of Trinity Christian School with, what, 16 students? You're just starting. So we have, I think, what's an interesting show today, and I am going to start with Sister. The Catholic schools, at least in this part of the country, have been the traditional Christian school mainstay, and have a tradition that goes back forever, just about.
In the Archdiocese of Omaha, I was just doing some research, and we have annual reports that go back to 1928.
28.
So since that time, we've grown to now we have 79 schools in the Archdiocese.
And they've had their ups and downs. I mean, they've been pretty strong all the time, but they've, you know, there have been times when some worried about closing doors and some, but basically a very strong system of independent schools. Each one is basically independent.
Yes, they are. That's one of our strengths, we like to say, is that they are very much site-based management and always have been.
Okay, the parishes sort of, they belong to the parish.
Right.
Now, Jean, you have a 9-year-old school, K through 8, that is overflowing. Its cup runneth over.
Yes, we're maxed out. Our capacity is 665, and right now we have 650. And next year we should go to capacity.
I mean, I remember news stories that I did when I was in television, where they had the campers camping out for a week to get in the line for when you had those few spaces open.
Yes, and there were some rather humorous stories about that, and maybe some other time I'd like to tell you about them, but it was rather humorous.
You wonder about the good Christian people that sometimes get a little competitive there.
They had to stay all week. You know, they could not go home, so they had to stay on site. And they say they bonded very much for the week.
I bet they did.
Yeah,
they
they
had
did.
their own little community going on in your parking lot.
Well, one of the reasons we changed is that we had heard they were going to come 2 and 3 weeks early. So we had to go to a different registration procedure.
Okay. And Marcia, here you are, a novice of sorts with a very, do you have 1 or 2 teachers?
We have 1 teacher and 1 helper currently.
And you're teaching what?
We have 3
grades?
kindergarten through 2nd.
So you're starting with that. You started with
small.
kindergarten, and then you're moving up, and you obviously had a dream about some Christian-based education.
A few people gathered together about 5 years ago and began planning this school and praying about it. And the Lord has just opened doors and answered prayers, and the school has come about and opened up in 1996 with just kindergarten. And we wanted to start very small and grow gradually. So it was kindergarten the first year and K1 and 2 this year.
Now, the reason I think this whole issue is fascinating, because there have been, I look back when the Omaha desegregation plan came into being, and in Omaha there was concern, even on the part of the Archbishop Daniel Sheen at the time, that there might be some white flight into some of the Catholic schools. So they were talked about then, but held very steady and very firm that they would not be a residence for white flight with the desegregation plan. And the ongoing arguments and concerns whether there should be vouchers so people could choose the schools. Private Christian schools are here to stay, though, are they not? And they are an excellent. Many people are opting for them. What is their pull? Obviously Christian-based, for those that have set of Christian beliefs. But I'll open this up. What is the pull that makes them stronger and stronger all the time now?
What I hear parents tell me is that we are reinforcing the values that they have at home, we're teaching at school. So they're not going to another educational facility and getting a different set of values than what they're receiving at home. I think that's number one priority to them. And a Christian-based education is another. And I think a strong academic is another reason. But I think primarily we're reinforcing the parents' value at home. We're just an extension of the home. I think that's one of the major reasons they're coming.
There is a lot of concern that our children are being dumbed down, civiled down, and then if you go to the religious aspect, religious valued down, that they are not getting that. And so it's not just, although the religion is the key, the apex of the private Christian school, it's not just that simple, though.
Nope.
No, it isn't, because people are coming to our schools, whether they're the Catholic schools or Christian schools, because they want an environment where their values can permeate the entire curriculum, where we're dealing with the children in their academic, their spiritual, their emotional, but it's all a package. And it is, as Jean mentioned, reinforcing what's happening in the home.
Now, there are many, many church-going people in the Omaha Metro and eastern Nebraska, but they all do not choose to send their children to Christian school. For some people, it is the money, but so we're still dealing with a small percentage. But do you see it growing, kind of, on the upswing?
Well, we see in our schools that the enrollment has been going up over the last few years, yes.
Speaking from West Omaha, I most definitely I think Christian schools are growing. I think there's another Christian school going to be starting next year in West Omaha. So it's a definite trend that's going to be here and going to stay here.
Council Bluffs is starting to pick up on that trend too. There have been some, but there's actually 3 or 4 in the last 10 years, small Christian schools in Council Bluffs that have started.
Yes, and as far as I know, they're all growing. I talked to them a few years ago. I haven't talked to them since we started our school. We do have a lot of phone calls, especially recently, wanting older grades, wanting their children, and we don't have that available. Next year we will open up 3rd grade, but we do have a lot of interest, people moving into the area, and they'll see it in the phone book and they will call. So yes, it is growing, and in fact I believe the Catholic school system had waiting lists for a while, and my grandchildren were in the Catholic school system and then came over to Trinity last year.
So we know you've narrowed down what the appeal is, Christian-based values, your values-based. The issue of quality education. The Catholic schools have generally been thought to over the years. I'm a little biased of the Omaha Catholic schools and a Catholic high school, but over the years, with some small pockets where they didn't have the funds, been thought to have pretty good academic. What is the academic rating or ranking, or how do you gauge yourself academically? Let's start with a little one.
Okay, we're generally 1 year above the public school system academically. We believe in setting the standards higher so that children will attain a higher standard rather than bringing the standard down so that all students will go to a lower standard.
In giving us the Stanford test from grades 2 through 8, our students in a compilation will score at least 1 grade level over grade level. And I'm hesitant to tell how many grade levels, but it's at least 1 grade level. So the academic excellence is there.
Now you tend to have a broader base student in some of the areas of town that are depressed economically and maybe educationally, so it might be harder to gauge that. And none of your schools, by the way, take special education, except maybe there might be one of the Catholic
Well, in the
schools.
Archdiocese, we do have the Madonna School, which is for exceptional
but
children.
that's
And we
separate.
have, students in some of our other schools who have special needs and are accepted. We don't tend to compare our schools, but when we look at our Archdiocesan averages, they consistently are above the state and national norms. And we require our students to take the Iowa tests of basic skills in the elementary level, and then at the high school level, our students, of course, take the ACTs and SATs. And they do well.
Do have a part-time resource teacher. So we do take a few learning disabled students that we can help. So we do just, this year has been our first year of doing that.
And I'm not putting you down, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying that you're dealing with a little narrower base, and not every, and you don't have to take, and I'm sure you don't, because you don't want disruptions in your school, that you don't take some of the BD, the behavioral disordered children, and the emotionally disordered children. So I'm not trying to say you're not doing a good job, but you don't have some of the things that do tend to bring scores down. So
I think that it's fair to say, though, that our schools do take children who have different types of needs if we are able to help them. And in some cases, they're in our schools, and then we do access or take advantage of help from the public school districts.
right, and I believe
Yeah.
Title.
Well, we all have Title I, but
So
we
you're able to
also
use
do
that.
receive speech and some other helps from the public schools.
So, and again, I'm not trying to put you down, but because you don't have the numbers sometimes in a school, it is not financially feasible to have a resource
Right.
teacher in every school or anything like that. So, what we have often seen, and I remember particularly when I was growing up, there were the signs on outside the Catholic schools. They'd have this Catholic school, in my case it was St. Joan of Arc, saves you X number of tax dollars. That was a big thing. You may recall they had them posted outside because you did want people to know that you were lifting some of the educational burden off the taxpayers if they,
Correct.
if you just dumped 50,000 students on them in the eastern, in the Omaha metro area. That you are helping taxpayers out.
Yes, we are.
Big time.
And
Definitely.
on the other hand, you'd like to have some of that money so that you can defray it. Is vouchers still a big issue with you?
I think the voucher issue kind of goes back and forth. Maybe a tax credit type of rebate would have more appeal, would have perhaps a better chance of making it through the courts, as it has in some states. But also then it's open to everybody, whether you're sending your child to a Christian school or if you have expenses in other things.
Yeah, I would agree with the same thing. I think at one time our parents were very interested in the vouchers. I think tax credit now has more of an emphasis. We're concerned with the vouchers, what strings are attached to the vouchers. That's what we're concerned about.
Right.
What will the federal government tell us to do and not to do? So that's our concern.
It's been my general feeling talking to people, though, that they would like to have some financial assistance or rebate or be able to defray some of the cost, but again, they don't want any strings. And part of the thing that they like is the total independence.
Right.
Yes, they do.
Yes.
And that is, you determine the curriculum within state boundaries. We have in Nebraska new state standards, educational standards that are expected to be met. And a lot of talk about more phonics, which I'm sure a lot of your schools do, and things like that. Are you comfortable with the new? Doesn't affect you over there, Trinity Lutheran, but I'm sure you have standards in
yet.
Iowa. But are you comfortable with everything that's been adopted so far?
Well, I think we are thus far because the reality is our schools can meet those standards without having to worry about it.
I would say the same.
Yeah.
I think our standards are probably higher than what the standards will come out of the state.
Because
that-
they're very minimal.
Not an issue, Carol.
No.
No. Well, that's good. When you go into the greater educational community in Omaha, I know there's some defensiveness on the part of the public school systems because they worry about vouchers and tax credits and things because of the traditional American public school system, for better or for worse, still does promise, especially with court cases involving integration, that still does promise some basic level of education to every student in the land. And if you look in many other countries, that isn't guaranteed. So do you understand the defensiveness? I mean, how do you cope with that? Or do you talk to these people at all?
Oh yes, we cooperate with schools very well, and I'm sure these folks do too.
Very well.
I think parents should have a choice. I've spent most of my time in public school education, and I've heard it from the public school standpoint about Christian schools, etc. But I think parents need to have a choice, and I think that the parents that we have are glad for the choice, and I think that we are good for one another. I think competition is good for one another. I think we can learn from one another, and we try to work well with the public schools because I say I'm a recipient of it. I came out of it, and my daughter teaches in a public school. So I think the competition is good for both.
I have always thought the competition was probably a very good thing for both sides. Probably one of the best from a totally pragmatic societal view, non-values view. Probably the best aspect of it. It keeps everybody on their toes.
It is, and we also have a good working relationship with the public schools, you know, and we're all about providing the best education for our children. It's just we wish to do it differently.
True. True.
And we think that people need that choice. But, you know, I found working with the public schools since I moved into the Nebraska area to be a really positive thing.
What is your favorite story to tell about, since this is Catholic Schools Week, I'll let you go first, sister, about something that just illustrates so clearly the value or stories that you've been told by former students or even yourself, that the stories you like to tell when you get on the podium and you talk about the thing you love, which is your school system. Gene's got one. He's
Yeah, let
ready.
him go while
I
I
was going
think.
to say,
He's on deck, but he's ready to go.
being a Christian school, a thing I think thrills us the most is when the kids will go home and they'll see something happen to a relative or a neighbor, and they will think, you know, we need to pray about that. We need to pray for them. I think application, putting things that they have learned in school and from the Bible, apply to their daily lives. I don't know if I can get a particular instance, but I do know those things have happened where they've been home, they'll tell their parents, we need to pray for such and such. I think that's very, very, very enjoyable.
I think we work really hard to help the young people who are in our schools at whatever level they are to develop that personal relationship with God. And I think I would agree with Jean that when they come across with, you know, situations where they think prayer is in order. This morning we had a liturgy at the cathedral for all of the 8th graders in the metropolitan area with the Archbishop, and they took up a collection for a orphanage in, I believe it was Santo Domingo, a children's orphanage.
And they
which was our
probably
8th
selected
graders.
that.
Right. And it was our 8th graders who have been very blessed in many ways that do that. But I think one of the funniest stories that I heard was from a child who was in a Catholic school, and they had a new baby in the family. And she announced to her mother that she thought they should take this baby up to church and have it hypnotized by the prince. So she had a few little gaps on
Well, you know,
vocabulary, but
they're just learning a
she
whole
knew
new
that it was
nomenclature.
important that this child become part of the church.
You know, when I was a kid growing up, we lived in Westgate, and we went to St. Joan of Arc, and Westgate School was nearby, and we used to call the other kids the publics, and they'd call us the Catholics. And you know, there was at least in the elementary grades, a feeling of, on both sides, guilty of looking down on the others. How do you sense your children perceive the other children? I mean, they live in the same world, in the same neighborhood, and the other way around? Or is it just not an issue?
I personally don't think it's an issue because they go back in their neighborhood, they're playing with their kids daily, other friends daily. Yeah, if it's an issue, I don't know about it. It may have been in the past, but I don't know so much now.
When your school, as we said, has a waiting list, and you hope to grow, and the Catholic schools, depending on what parish you're in,
Right.
you've got some really strong schools. But I remember you had to go through some, in the Catholic school system, they had a lot of the parishes that didn't have enough children to go. And I believe All Saints
We
was
did
sort
some
of
consolidating,
a consolidation.
yes.
And when the city, and the Catholic schools can speak to this probably more, when the city goes through the change that it's going through and has to close some schools and open some new ones, is that a painful process in deciding?
Very. I was not in the Archdiocese when that consolidation took place, but it's always very painful because the schools are such a key part of the parish, and people really want to keep that school. It gives a vitality to the parish, and you know, so it is painful. It's kind of a letting go when,
And since
even
the
though
Catholic
something new
schools
comes out of it.
are geographical, in
Right.
other words, it's almost like the neighborhood public schools, as then they're identified with. I
Right.
remember we'd say, or we're going over to the OLL area, meaning Our Lady of Lourdes, or down to St. P and P. We'd always say St. Peter and Paul, but we'd know. And when I said well, my friend lives down by St. Peter and Paul, my mom always knew what neighborhood I was in, where it is. A little different with the other Christian schools and private schools that are popping up. They serve a
Yeah, we serve a rather broad area. We have a family that comes in 5 miles the other side of Fremont. We have them coming in from Louisville, down around Bellevue. So we cover a broad area. Yes.
The parents that send their kids to all of your schools are very driven. So that means they're generally more involved than I think the average PTA. That says something about the school, and that's one of the important things, is it not? In your school, they probably even help with just about everything, right?
We do have a parent that comes in and helps with the school. We have a parent that went to Russia this year, and so one of our mission, like the Catholic schools, one of our missions during chapel was to give to an orphanage also in Russia. And then that parent went over and took pictures and brought them back and showed the children that the toothbrushes that they gave actually went to the students, that the money that they gave actually went to buy paint. And so they got to see firsthand where their money went for that mission. And so in that way they're involved.
Those are the kinds of special lessons.
Yeah. And I think one of the strengths of a Christian school is parental involvement. You know, they're paying extra money to send a child to that school.
And an investment does make a difference.
So that's where their heart is, yes.
And I think that would be involvement that many of the public schools, depending on, not all of them, but would envy. I know, talking to principals, no matter what school you teach in, that will say that parental involvement is one of the supreme needs to teach children, to know that everybody's on the same page. And that probably happens more naturally in a school that has a theological or a philosophical bent. What are the issues facing Christian schools and Catholic schools nationwide, besides always having enough money to do what they want? That will never change. What are the big issues? Any? You're all just happy as clams?
Think about it.
I don't mean controversies per se. I mean just some of the issues where you.
I think one of the things that we would like to do more of with parental involvement has to probably be an area of sex education, in which we've not been able to do a lot of up to now. We'd probably like to do a lot more of that with parental involvement. That's probably one area that I think we need to do more of.
See, and I said we weren't going to talk about sexual.
Well, I'm sorry.
No, but you know, I think that people think that Catholic schools, maybe the more conservative Christian schools, tend to just either avoid this subject altogether in schools or say, sex, no. You know, and that there are, I won't say gray areas in there, but there are certainly. Growing up sexually is growing up human. And so even you grapple with the wanting to do it right, do it better.
I think, though, the issue with sex education in a Christian school would be different because you can look at it from God's point of view.
Right.
And you're not looking at it from a secular point of view. So no matter how it's taught, it will be taught a different way in a Christian school. And I think...
Granted, but I mean just to be able to have the resources and the parental involvement and everybody sitting around. Yes, it is difficult for parents. I'm probably already a year or so too late, but I know I've got to get on the stick, but it is, we just aren't real good at talking about it all the time. So
I think a continual challenge in all of our schools is to help the students not only to hear what we're trying to say in terms of how they take the gospel message, but to live it and give them opportunities to really practice service and build community so that, you know, they know how to be able to deal with the society that they're going to live in.
Well, and the sexual revolution that is ongoing, just when
Gangs
you think
and
that it
drugs and all
can't
of
get
that.
any, where kids have to deal with any more pressures. And then we had AIDS, and we have gangs, drugs, just violence. I mean, choice, I think we all wish that our children only had very clear choices. This is good and this is evil. And boy, you sure can tell the difference. And there's, you know, but...
I think there's one of the reasons that our parents come to our schools again is that they're a little dissatisfied with what some of the public schools are doing in this area. So I think that some will come to a Christian school to get it from as she said, a Christian standpoint.
You know, I do think, and I'm not defending anybody, I just know that it is a difficult, and it was a lot of talk about secular humanism years ago, and I'm not even sure what that means anymore. It's a term that's been bandied about so much that I think different people have a lot of different ideas, but I know it is difficult in any classroom where you are dealing with a variety of backgrounds, a variety of disciplines, let alone religions, the difference, to be all things to all children.
Right.
I mean, it's a lot easier when you have a pretty much down one road. I'm not saying you have it easy, but the parents want it to be a little easier. They don't want their children distracted by a lot of that, I think.
Well, and they also know that, you know, they're going to grow up and go out into a world that has all these distractions, so they want to know that they're rooted in values that are going to help them make the right choices.
Do you think that the kids that come to your schools are prepared in the sense, taking the ostrich technique, you know, faith that's not tested at all, maybe isn't faith, or do you think that you really talk about real situations out there, or they run into them and you talk about them in school?
I think we really talk about them and try to provide opportunities for them to put things into practice.
I think we do them a disservice if we did not. And there's no way that we can isolate the kids. They live in the community, they have television. But I think that we do them a disservice if we do not discuss issues that are relevant. Yes, we need to.
Do you see the growth of Christian schools? I mean, will I be sitting, well, I won't be sitting here in 20 years, but do you see in 20 years, let's say, or another, into the next millennium, as they like to say, that we're going to see a real proliferation of private and Christian schools?
I know of 3 Lutheran schools that are starting. The one in West Omaha, the Abundant Life School is the name of it now, will be housed at Beautiful Savior. That will start in the fall, but I was in touch with David Mueller this morning and asked him how many they were going to take, and he said we can only take 112 students, and that's K1 through 4. I know there's a high school opening up in Des Moines in the near future, Lutheran High School, and I know that Lutheran High School in Lincoln, Nebraska, opened up their junior and senior year this year.
So it's on the
And
move.
so,
It's probably
yes,
making a bigger
yes.
move than it's made in the last, let's say, 25
It seems
years.
to.
No
Well,
question.
I want to thank you for coming today. I know some of you were a little nervous. I want to thank Sister Margaret Mary Murphy and Jean Bentley and Marcia Caterite. Thank you for joining us. Good topic, good issue, and we'll be watching you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Carol.